"You're not my mother." My son said it loud enough for the entire table to hear. The room didn't just go silent. It collapsed into silence. Forks hovered midair. Someone's glass stopped halfway to their lips. Even the soft music playing in the background seemed to fade into nothing. It was Mother's Day, and I was standing at the head of the table I had set myself. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry. I simply looked at him, at the boy I had raised, the man I had spent my entire life protecting, the child who used to cling to my hand crossing the street, who once cried when I left him at kindergarten for the first time. Now he couldn't even look me in the eyes. "I think," he added, his voice colder now, rehearsed almost, "it's time we stopped pretending." A few people shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. My sister-in-law glanced down at her plate. My neighbor, whom I had invited out of courtesy, suddenly found great interest in her napkin. But no one spoke. Not even her. My daughter-in-law sat beside him, her posture straight, her lips pressed into something that almost looked like concern, if you didn't look too closely. But I had known her for 12 years. I knew the difference. She wasn't surprised. She was waiting. I placed the serving spoon down carefully next to the bowl of mashed potatoes. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me more than anything. "I see," I said quietly. It was the only thing I allowed myself, because anything more would have broken the moment, and I had the strange feeling that this moment mattered more than I understood yet. "I'm glad you're here. Stay with me until the end of my story, and tell me where you're watching from." I used to believe stories like mine only happened in other families, not mine. I was 71 years old. I had spent the entire morning preparing that meal. Roast turkey, glazed carrots, my son's favorite sweet potato casserole. The same recipe I'd made every Mother's Day since he was 12. Back when he used to bring me handmade cards with crooked handwriting and too much glue. Back when he used to call me Mom like it meant something. The dining room looked beautiful. I had taken out my best china. The one with the delicate blue trim my late husband used to tease me about. Said I only brought it out when I wanted to impress people. Maybe I did. Or maybe I just wanted to feel like I still belonged at that table. His chair, my son's chair, was pulled slightly closer to hers now. I noticed that. Small things become loud when everything else goes quiet. "I think we should be honest," he continued, still not looking at me. "About everything." Everything. Such a simple word. Such a dangerous one. I glanced at him again, really looked this time. His jaw was tight. His shoulders stiff. Like he was bracing for impact. But not from me. From something else. Or someone else. "You've been overstepping," he said finally. "For a while now. Overstepping." I repeated the word silently in my head, as if turning it over might make it mean something different. Overstepping into what? My own family? My own home? My own life? "I only came because you invited me," I said, still calm, still measured. It wasn't a defense. It was a fact. He flinched just slightly, barely noticeable. But I saw it. I always saw everything when it came to him. "Things have changed," he replied quickly. "Too quickly. You can't just show up and act like." "Like what?" I asked. That was the first time I interrupted him. Not loudly. Not emotionally. Just enough. His mouth opened, then closed again. And for the first time since he spoke, he looked at her. Just for a second. But that second told me everything. She gave the smallest nod. That was all he needed. "Like you're still the center of everything," he finished. The words landed harder than the first ones. Not my mother. Not the center. Not needed. The message was clear. I stood there for a moment longer. No one moved. No one defended me. No one said, "That's enough." And that silence, that was louder than anything he had said. I reached for my purse, which I had placed neatly on the sideboard before dinner. I picked it up, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked toward the door. Still no one stopped me. At the doorway I paused. Not to turn around. Not to argue. Just to breathe. "I hope," I said softly without looking back, "that this was worth it." Then I walked out. And that was the moment everything began to change. Top of form, bottom of form, the drive home felt longer than usual. Not because of traffic. There wasn't any. But because silence, when it settles inside you, stretches time in ways nothing else can. I kept both hands on the steering wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The same road I had driven for over 30 years. The same turns, the same streetlights, the same familiar houses with their neatly trimmed lawns. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. "You're not my mother." The words replayed in my mind, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly like an echo that refused to fade. I didn't cry. Not then. Not when I pulled into my driveway. Not when I turned off the engine and sat there for a moment longer than necessary, staring at the front door of the house I had shared with my husband for over 3 decades. The porch light was still on. I had left it that way before I went to the dinner. A small habit. He used to say it made the house feel like it was waiting for me. I opened the door and stepped inside. The house greeted me the way it always did. Still, quiet, unchanged. Too unchanged. I slipped off my shoes by the door, placing them neatly beside the pair I had worn the day before. Routine. Order. Small things that still made sense. The scent of lavender lingered faintly in the air. I had cleaned that morning, before leaving for the celebration. I remember thinking how nice it would be to come home to a tidy house after a warm evening with family. I walked into the kitchen. The counter was spotless. The sink empty. Except for one thing. A single wrapped gift sat near the edge of the table. I stopped. For a moment I just looked at it. It wasn't large. Simple wrapping paper. Pale blue. A ribbon tied carefully. Not perfectly but with intention. My own handwriting stared back at me from the small card attached. To Mom. I had bought it myself. A few days earlier. Just in case. Because somewhere deep down I think I already knew. I pulled out the chair and sat down slowly. The kitchen clock ticked softly on the wall. Tick, tick, tick. Each second felt louder than it should. I reached for the gift but didn't open it. Instead, I rested my hand on top of it, feeling the slight give of the paper beneath my palm. 71 years old. And this was my Mother's Day. I let out a slow breath. Still no tears. That surprised me again. I thought about the past. Not in big moments. Not in dramatic memories. But in small, ordinary ones. Sunday mornings with pancakes. His little hands gripping the edge of the counter as he tried to help me stir batter that was too thick for him. "Let me do it, Mom." His voice high and eager. Flour on his cheeks. Laughter filling this very kitchen. I could almost hear it. But memory is a strange thing. It doesn't stay. It flickers. And then it's gone. Replaced by silence again. I stood up and walked into the living room. His father's chair was still there. I hadn't moved it. Couldn't. The indentation in the cushion remained, as if he had just stood up moments ago and might come back at any second. My husband used to sit there every evening reading the paper, occasionally glancing up to ask me something trivial. "Did you pay the electric bill? Where'd I leave my glasses?" Simple things. Comforting things. He would have said something tonight. Not loudly. Not angrily. But firmly. He wouldn't have let it happen. I know that. Or maybe, I just want to believe that. I sat down across from that empty chair and folded my hands in my lap. "They said I'm not his mother," I whispered into the quiet room. Saying it out loud made it real in a way thinking it hadn't. The words didn't echo this time. They settled. Heavy. Final. I closed my eyes for a moment. And then something shifted. Not grief. Not anger. Something quieter. Colder. A question. Not why he said it, but how long he had felt that way. Because words like that, they don't appear overnight. They grow. Slowly. Silently. Fed by something. Or someone. My eyes opened again, and I stared at the empty chair across from me. Then I looked back toward the kitchen. At the untouched gift sitting on the table. Still waiting. Still unopened. Just like me. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel broken. I felt aware. And that was far more dangerous. The strange thing about betrayal is that it rarely begins with something loud. It begins quietly. So quietly you almost miss it. I sat there in my living room, the house wrapped in that familiar silence, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to look back. Not at the good memories. At the ones I had ignored. The small things. The things that didn't seem important at the time. But now felt different. Clearer. Sharper. like puzzle pieces finally snapping into place. It hadn't always been like this. There was a time when my son used to call me every Sunday, like clockwork. "Just checking in, Mom," he'd say. Sometimes the conversations were short, sometimes longer, but they were consistent, reliable, comforting. Then they started changing. First it was small. A missed call here. A busy this week there. Perfectly reasonable. He had a career. A life. A wife. I understood that. Or at least, I told myself I did. Then the calls became texts. Short ones. "Hey Mom, can't talk. We'll call later." He rarely did. I remember the first time I noticed it clearly. It was last fall. I had made his favorite apple pie. The kind with the lattice crust he used to love when he was a boy. I spent the whole afternoon baking it, letting the scent fill the house, just like it used to. I called him. No answer. I waited an hour. Called again. This time he picked up. "Hey Mom. I'm kind of in the middle of something." His voice sounded distracted. Not annoyed, just distant. "Oh, I just made your favorite pie," I said lightly. "Thought maybe you and..." "We already ate," he interrupted. A pause. Then, "Maybe next time, okay?" Next time. There's always a next time until there isn't. I remember standing in the kitchen, the pie still warm on the counter, not knowing what to do with it. I ended up slicing a piece anyway. Sat down at the table. Ate it alone. It didn't taste the same. At the time, I told myself I was being sensitive. People get busy. Life moves on. But that wasn't the only thing. There were other moments. Subtle. Easy to dismiss. Like Thanksgiving. They told me dinner would be at 6. I arrived at 5:45. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I knocked. No answer. I called. Straight to voicemail. I stood there on the porch, holding the pumpkin pie I had brought, feeling something twist uncomfortably in my chest. An hour later he called me back. "Oh Mom. Didn't anyone tell you? We changed it to earlier. Last minute thing." Last minute. Of course. "It's fine," I said, because what else was I supposed to say? Another time I came over to visit. Unannounced, yes. But I had done that for years. I had my own key. Or at least, I used to. That day the key didn't work. I tried it twice. 3 times. Nothing. I stood there confused until the door opened. She was the one who answered. My daughter-in-law. Her smile was polite. Too polite. "Oh," she said as if surprised. "You should have called first." "I've always had a key," I replied gently. "We changed the locks," she said quickly. "Security reasons." Security. Of course. Everything had a reasonable explanation. Every single thing. Individually they made sense. Together, they told a story. A story I hadn't wanted to read. I walked back into the kitchen now, my eyes drifting once again to the gift sitting on the table. Unopened. Unwanted. Like a gesture that no longer had a place. I pulled out the chair and sat down slowly. There was one memory that stood out more than the others. One moment I had brushed aside too easily. It was about 3 months ago. We were all having dinner together. Not a holiday. Just a regular evening. I remember laughing at something. I don't even recall what. But I do remember what came after. A look. They exchanged a look. My son and his wife. It was quick. Almost invisible. But it was there. And then she said casually, "Some people just don't know when to step back." I thought she was talking about someone else. A friend. A coworker. I even nodded. Agreed politely. Now, I'm not so sure. I sat there, the weight of it all settling around me, not suffocating, just pressing in from all sides. It hadn't happened all at once. It never does. It had been building. Slowly. Carefully. Deliberately. And I had let it. Because I trusted them. Because I believed that love was enough to keep a place in someone's life. But love, I was beginning to understand, can be rewritten, redefined, or erased entirely. And the most unsettling part? I still didn't know when my son had stopped seeing me as his mother, or why. But I had a feeling. I was about to find out. I used to believe that love once given stayed where you placed it. That if you raised a child with care, with patience, with everything you had, it would come back to you. Not as a debt, but as something natural, something unspoken. Sitting there at the kitchen table, I let my hand rest on the unopened gift again. And for the first time that night, I allowed myself to remember everything. Not just the recent years, not just the cracks, but the foundation, the life I had built for him. I was 28 when his father and I bought this house. It wasn't much back then. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that barely fit both of us at the same time. But it was ours. We painted the walls ourselves, argued over colors, laughed when we got paint on the ceiling. And when I found out I was pregnant, we turned the smallest room into a nursery. I remember standing in that doorway, one hand on my stomach, imagining the life that would fill that space. I had no idea how much of myself I would pour into it. He was born on a cold February morning, snow still lining the sidewalks. I remember the nurse placing him in my arms, so small, so fragile, so completely dependent on me. And in that moment, everything changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, just quietly, completely. My world became him, his needs, his future, his happiness. I stayed home the first few years, not because we could afford it easily, we couldn't, but because I didn't want someone else raising him. His father worked longer hours. I stretched every dollar, cut coupons, cooked meals that lasted 2, sometimes 3 days. There were nights I skipped dinner so he wouldn't have to, not out of sacrifice, just necessity. When he got sick, I stayed up all night beside his bed, counting his breaths. When he had nightmares, I was the one he called for. Always me. Mom. That word used to mean something. It used to carry weight, warmth, trust. When he started school, I walked him there every morning, held his hand a little too tightly, watched him disappear into the building, and stood there longer than I needed to, just to make sure he was okay. His father used to tease me. You worry too much. Maybe I did. But I also paid attention. I saw things. The way he struggled with reading in 2nd grade. The way he pretended not to care when other kids made fun of him. The way he would sit quietly at the dinner table, pushing food around his plate when something was bothering him. I noticed. I always noticed. And I helped him through it. We both did. His father and I. Together. We weren't perfect, but we were present. And when his father passed, everything shifted again. That was 10 years ago. A heart attack. Sudden. No warning. One moment he was sitting in that chair in the living room. The next, gone. I remember the silence that followed. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, it feels taken. Like something was removed from the world and nothing could fill the space it left behind. My son stood beside me at the funeral. Strong. Composed. Holding my hand. I've got you, Mom, he said. I'll take care of you now. I believed him. Of course I did. Because that's what family does. We carry each other when one of us falls. Or at least we're supposed to. After that, I tried not to lean on him too much. He had his own life. His own responsibilities. I didn't want to be a burden. That word again. Burden. It's funny how words travel through time and change meaning. I started doing things on my own. Fixing what I could. Learning what I didn't know. I kept the house running. Kept everything steady. Even when it wasn't. Then he met her. First, I was happy. Truly. She was charming. Polite. Attentive. She brought wine when she visited. Complimented my cooking. Called me Mom with a soft smile. Thought, this is good. This is how the family grows. But growth isn't always what it seems. Sometimes it's not expansion. Sometimes it's replacement. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my eyes drifting again toward the empty space across from me. His father's chair. Still there. Still silent. You said you'd take care of me, I whispered. Softly. Not in anger. Not in accusation. Just remembering. Because somewhere between that promise and tonight's words, something had changed. Something I hadn't fully seen. Or maybe, something I hadn't wanted to see. Now, I couldn't unsee it. Not anymore. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I had somewhere to be, but because sleep no longer held me. The house was still. That same stillness I had grown used to over the years, but today it felt different. Not empty. Not painful. Just clear. I made myself a cup of coffee. Black. The way my husband used to drink it. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down in the same chair as the night before. The gift was still there. Unopened. Untouched. Waiting. Just like yesterday. I looked at it for a moment, then gently pushed it aside. Some things didn't need to be opened to be understood. The clock on the wall read 7:12 a.m. Too early for most people, but not for everyone. Right on time the phone rang. I didn't jump, didn't hesitate. I simply reached over and answered. Hello. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a voice I hadn't heard in a while. Margaret. I recognized it instantly. Helen. My husband's younger sister. We weren't particularly close, but we had always been respectful, quietly connected through him more than anything else. Yes, I replied. It's me. Another pause. Longer this time. I heard what happened yesterday. Of course she had. News like that doesn't stay in one place. Not in families like ours. I see, I said calmly. I'm sorry, she added, her voice softer now. I didn't know if I should call. But I couldn't just stay quiet. That caught my attention. Helen was not the kind of person who called just because. She chose her moments. Carefully. I appreciate that, I said. Really? Silence again. But this one wasn't empty. It was building toward something. Margaret, she said finally, lowering her voice slightly. Has David spoken to you about the house? The question landed gently, but it stayed. The house. Of all things. No, irraplia. He hasn't. A faint exhale came through the line. Not relief. Not quite concern. Something in between. I thought so, she murmured. My fingers tightened slightly around the coffee cup. Helen, I said, my tone still steady. What are you talking about? She hesitated. Just for a second. Then, I wasn't supposed to say anything, she admitted. But after what he said to you yesterday, I don't think you deserve to be in the dark anymore. In the dark. That phrase again. Seemed to follow me now. About what? I asked. My voice didn't rise. Didn't crack. But something inside me sharpened. I ran into him and Laura last week, she continued. At a real estate office. I didn't interrupt. I just listened. They didn't see me, she added quickly. But I heard enough. A pause. Then carefully. They were asking about transferring ownership. My heart didn't race. It didn't drop. It simply stilled. Ownership of what? I asked even though I already knew the answer. Another pause. Longer this time. Your house, Margaret. The words settled into the space between us. Heavy. Precise. Irreversible. I set my coffee cup down slowly. The sound it made against the table was louder than it should have been. They said something about paperwork, Helen went on. About how it would be easier if everything was already in David's name. Of course. Easier. That word again. Always wrapped in reason. Always hiding something else underneath. And Laura. Helen hesitated again. Yes. I prompted. She was the one leading the conversation. Of course she was. I leaned back slightly in my chair, my eyes drifting once more to the gift sitting just a few inches away. Unopened. Unnecessary. Helen, I said after a moment, why are you telling me this? It wasn't accusation. It was clarity. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice had changed. It didn't feel right, she said simply. And your husband, my brother. He trusted you with everything. That name. That memory. It landed differently now. Not soft. Not comforting. But grounding. I don't know what they've told you, she continued. Or what they're planning exactly. But I thought you should at least know. No. Such a small word. Such a powerful one. I nodded slowly even though she couldn't see me. I understand, I said. And for the first time since yesterday, I meant it. We spoke a little longer. Nothing important. Nothing necessary. Just enough to close the call without leaving it hanging. When I hung up, the house was quiet again. But not the same quiet. This one had direction. I turned my gaze fully to the gift. Reached for it. This time. Picked it up. Turned it over in my hands. Then, without ceremony, I set it aside, still unopened. 'Cause now, I had something far more important to unwrap. The truth. And I had a feeling it was only just beginning. The truth doesn't always arrive like a storm. Sometimes, it settles quietly, like dust. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I stood there in the kitchen for a long moment after the call ended, my hand still resting lightly on the edge of the table. Your house, Margaret. The words echoed, not loudly but steadily. Not emotional. Not chaotic. Just certain. I didn't panic. That surprised me. I didn't rush to call my son. Didn't demand explanations. Didn't confront anyone. Because something inside me had already shifted. This wasn't confusion anymore. This was clarity. And clarity doesn't react. It observes. I walked slowly down the hallway toward the small study at the back of the house. The room hadn't changed in years. Same wooden desk. Same filing cabinet. Same faint scent of old paper and polish. My husband used to sit here every Sunday afternoon going through bills, organizing documents, making sure everything was in order. Always know where things are, he used to say. Not because you expect trouble, but because life doesn't warn you before it changes. I hadn't touched most of his files since he passed. Not out of fear. Just respect. But today, that felt different. I pulled open the top drawer of the cabinet. Folders. Neatly labeled. Insurance. Utilities. Bank statements. And then property. My fingers paused for a brief second before I pulled the folder out. Felt heavier than it should have. I carried it to the desk and sat down slowly. For a moment I just looked at it. Then I opened it. The papers were exactly as I remembered. Deeds. Tax records. Official stamps. Signatures. Both of ours. Mine and his. I read through them carefully. Not rushing. Not skimming. Line by line. Word by word. And then I saw it. A clause. One I had forgotten. Or maybe never fully understood at the time. The property was not solely his. It had been transferred into joint ownership years ago. Then later. Updated. After his passing. To me. Fully. Irrevocably. No secondary name. No shared claim. No conditional transfer. Just mine. Completely. I leaned back slightly in the chair. Not relieved. Not surprised. Just confirmed. They don't know, I murmured softly. That was the first thought that came to me. Not anger. Not betrayal. Just understanding. They didn't know. Or worse, they thought I didn't. I closed the folder gently and rested my hand on top of it. For years I had tried to make things easier. Simpler. More comfortable for them. I didn't ask questions. Didn't interfere. Didn't insist on my place. I thought that was what love looked like. Space. Trust. Patience. But now I could see it clearly. Space had turned into distance. Trust had turned into assumption. And patience had turned into silence. I stood up and walked toward the window. The morning light had grown stronger now, casting soft shadows across the yard. Everything outside looked peaceful. Ordinary. Unaware. Just like yesterday. Just like before. I folded my arms loosely, my eyes scanning the familiar view. The tree my son used to climb when he was 10. The fence his father built by hand. The garden I had maintained year after year. This wasn't just a house. It was a life. And someone had quietly decided it was theirs to take. I let out a slow breath. Still no anger. Not yet. Just resolve. I walked back to the desk and picked up the folder again. This time I didn't put it back. Instead, I carried it with me to the kitchen. Placed it neatly beside the unopened gift. Two things. One representing what I thought I had. The other, what I actually had. I looked at them both for a moment. Then I reached for my phone. Not to call my son. Not to call her. But someone else. Someone who dealt in facts. Not emotions. The number was still saved. I hadn't used it in years. But I remembered it clearly. I pressed call. It rang twice. Then, "Good morning, Carter and Blake Law Offices." My voice didn't hesitate. "Hello," I said calmly. "This is Margaret Ellis." A brief pause. Then recognition. "Mrs. Ellis, it's been a while." "Yes," I replied. "It has." Another pause. Polite. Professional. How can we help you today? I glanced down at the folder, then at the gift, then back at the window, and for the first time since yesterday, I allowed myself a small smile. I'd like to review my assets, I said. Simple, clear, controlled. Because if they thought I didn't understand what was happening, that was their first mistake. And I had no intention of correcting it. Not yet. There's a moment, right before everything becomes undeniable. A moment where suspicion turns into certainty. And once you cross it, you don't go back. 2 days after my call to the law office, I found myself sitting across from a man who had known my husband for over 20 years. Mr. Carter hadn't changed much. Same calm voice, same measured tone, same way of looking at documents as if they spoke louder than people ever could. Everything appears to be in order, Mrs. Ellis, he said, sliding the folder back toward me. The house is entirely in your name. There are no pending transfers, no legal claims, no authorizations for change. I nodded. I thought so. He studied me for a moment longer than necessary. Has someone suggested otherwise? A simple question, but it carried weight. Not directly, I replied, but I've been given reason to believe something may be happening behind the scenes. He leaned back slightly in his chair. That was new. Mr. Carter didn't lean back unless something interested him. Then we should take a closer look, he said. That was how it started. Not with confrontation, not with accusations, but with paperwork, records, requests, quiet inquiries, things most people wouldn't notice. But people like him always did. Within an hour he had already found something. Not illegal. Not yet. But close enough. There have been preliminary inquiries, he said carefully, turning his screen slightly so I could see. Someone contacted a brokerage firm regarding a potential transfer of ownership. My eyes scanned the lines, dates, times, names, and there it was. Laura, my daughter-in-law, listed not as an owner, not as a representative, but as an interested party. Interested. Such a polite word for something so calculated. She doesn't have the authority to do anything, I said. No, he agreed. She doesn't. A pause. But she's trying to understand the process. Of course she was. I sat back in my chair, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Still calm. Still composed. But something inside me had shifted again. This wasn't assumption anymore. This wasn't distance or misunderstanding. This was intention. Clear. Focused. Deliberate. Is there anything else? I asked. Mr. Carter hesitated. Just briefly. Then, there is one more thing. He clicked again. Another document appeared. This one more recent. Your son, he said slowly, has made an inquiry as well. That landed differently. Not sharper. Just deeper. I leaned forward slightly. What kind of inquiry? A question about expedited transfer procedures, he replied. Specifically in cases involving aging homeowners. Aging homeowners. I almost smiled. Not out of humor, but recognition. So that was the plan. Not force, not confrontation, just positioning, making it look reasonable, necessary, practical. She's been guiding him, I said quietly. Mr. Carter didn't respond. He didn't need to. The silence confirmed it. I looked down at my hands, steady, not trembling, not weak, just still. And for the first time since this began, I allowed myself to feel something closer to anger. Not loud, not explosive, but precise, measured, cold. They think I don't understand, I said. Mr. Carter met my gaze. Do you want them to know that you do? The question hung in the air between us. Simple, direct, powerful. I thought about it. About my son. About the boy who once promised to take care of me. About the man who couldn't look me in the eye when he said I wasn't his mother. About the woman sitting beside him, nodding, guiding, shaping every word. Do you want them to know? I leaned back slowly and shook my head. No, I said. Not yet. We spent the next hour going over everything. Options, protections, possibilities. Not dramatic, not emotional, Just strategic. By the time I left that office, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't hurt in the same way. Because pain fades when it's replaced by clarity. Now, I understood exactly what I was dealing with. When I got home, the house felt different again. Not quieter. Not heavier. Just mine. Completely. I walked into the kitchen and set my keys down on the table. The gift was still there. Unopened. Waiting. But now it didn't feel sad. It felt irrelevant. I moved it aside. Placed the folder from the law office in its place. Truth replacing illusion. Reality replacing expectation. I ran my fingers lightly over the edge of the paper. Then stopped. Because something clicked. A memory. A moment. That dinner 3 months ago. The look they exchanged. The words. She had said, "Some people just don't know when to step back." I hadn't understood it then. But I did now. She wasn't talking about someone else. She was talking about me. About removing me. Piece by piece. Until there was nothing left to remove. I stood there in the kitchen for a long moment. Then I spoke. Not loudly. Not angrily. Just clearly. "You planned this." The words didn't echo. They settled. Like truth always does. And for the first time, I realized something even more important than what they were doing. I realized they thought they were winning. And that was going to be their biggest mistake. After that call, something shifted. Not in me. In him. Over the next few days, my son called more often. Not every day. But enough to feel intentional. Calculated. Like someone trying to reestablish something they had already broken. "Just checking in," he said the next afternoon. I was thinking about stopping by. Stopping by. He hadn't stopped by in months. "Of course," I replied calmly. "You're always welcome." That was true. Technically. He came that evening. Alone. That was the first thing I noticed. No Laura. No careful eyes watching from the side. No silent signals guiding his words. Just him. Standing at the front door like he used to. Almost. I opened it before he could knock twice. Mom. He looked different. Not older. Not tired. Just unsettled. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. He walked past me slowly, glancing around the house as if seeing it for the first time. Or maybe, as if measuring it. Rooms. Space. Distance. Value. "Everything looks the same," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It does." That seemed to catch him off guard. He nodded, then moved into the living room. His father's chair was still there. Of course it was. He looked at it briefly, then away. "I haven't been here in a while," he added. I noticed. Silence. I gestured toward the couch. "Seat." He did. I remained standing for a moment, then took the chair across from him. The same position I had taken 2 nights ago. Only now, everything was different. "I didn't come here to argue," he said quickly. "I assumed as much." Another pause. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hands together. "I just think we need to be on the same page." Same page. Almost smiled again. "That depends," I said calmly, "on what you think the page says." He blinked. Just once. Small. But enough. "It's not about anything bad," he continued. "It's just practical." There it was. Practical. Another one of those words. Clean. Reasonable. Empty. "You're getting older, Mom," he said carefully. "Aging homeowner." The phrase echoed quietly in my mind. "And I worry," he added. Of course he did. "I appreciate that," I replied. And I meant it. Because worry in its pure form is love. But this wasn't pure. "I just think," he went on, "it might make sense to start planning ahead." Planning. Another layer. Another step. "And what kind of planning do you have in mind?" I asked. My voice didn't change. Didn't rise. Didn't challenge. Simply waited. He hesitated. There it was again. That gap. That space where his thoughts didn't quite belong to him. "Well," he started, then stopped. Then, "Things like the house." Of course. Always the house. "It's a lot to manage," he continued quickly. "Maintenance, taxes, everything. I just don't want you to feel overwhelmed." Overwhelmed. Such a careful word. Wrapped in concern. Delivered with precision. I leaned back slightly, letting the silence stretch just long enough. Do I seem overwhelmed to you? I asked. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. No, he admitted. Honest. At least that. I just think it would be easier, he added, if things were simplified. Simplified. Transferred. Reassigned. Controlled. And how would you suggest we simplify them? I asked. That was the moment. The one he had been building toward. The one she had likely rehearsed with him. He shifted slightly in his seat, looked down at his hands, then back at me. We could start looking at options, he said. Maybe putting the house in my name. Just for security. There it was. Finally. Clear. Direct. Out in the open. I didn't react. Not visibly. Not emotionally. I simply looked at him. Really looked this time. At the man sitting across from me. My son. Asking me to give him something he had already tried to take. Security, I repeated softly. Yes, he said quickly. Just in case anything happens. Anything happens. I nodded slowly, as if considering it, as if this was new information, as if I hadn't already seen the paperwork, the inquiries, the plan. I understand, I said. And, again, I meant it. Because now I understood everything. Not just what he was asking, but why. And more importantly, who was behind it. He relaxed slightly, just a little. Enough to think it was working, that I was listening, that I was agreeing. I'm glad, he said. I just want what's best for you. Of course he did. Or at least, he believed he did. I stood up slowly, walked toward the kitchen. He watched me unsure. I picked up the folder from the table, the one he hadn't noticed, the one that held everything. Then I turned back toward him, still calm, still steady. David, I said. Yes. I met his eyes, fully, clearly, and for the first time since he arrived, he didn't look away. I agree, I said again, and this time, the words meant something entirely different, because the tension wasn't in what was said anymore. It was in what was coming next, and he had no idea how close he was to stepping into it. There's a moment, in every quiet plan, where silence is no longer useful. I stood there, the folder in my hands, watching him, my son, waiting, expecting something, agreement, permission, surrender. He didn't know which one yet, but he believed it was coming. Sit, I said again. He did, slower this time, more cautious. I walked back into the living room and placed the folder gently on the coffee table between us. Not dramatically, not forcefully, just deliberately. What's that? He asked. His voice had changed. Not much, but enough. Something important, I replied. I took my seat across from him again. Same position, same distance. But this time, I wasn't the one being asked questions. I think you're right, I said calmly. His shoulders relaxed slightly. That small shift again. Hope, or maybe relief. I'm glad you see it that way, he said. Of course he was.
He continued.
Then I reached forward, opened the folder, and turned it toward him. He leaned in, first casually, then more carefully. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then back to the first again. I watched it happen. That moment, when confidence begins to crack. What is this? He asked. But this time, he already knew. These, I said, my voice steady, are the official records of the property. He swallowed, barely noticeable, but I saw it. I reviewed everything, I continued. With Mr. Carter. That name landed. He recognized it. Of course he did. His father's lawyer. Our lawyer. You went to a lawyer? He asked. Yes. A simple answer, because it was a simple fact. Silence stretched between us. Heavy now. No longer empty. Filled. With understanding. With realization. With something else. Something closer to fear. The house, I said softly, is entirely in my name. I didn't rush the words. Didn't emphasize them. I just let them exist. He blinked. Once. Twice. His fingers tightened slightly against his knee. That doesn't change anything, he said quickly. Too quickly. It changes everything, I replied. Another pause. Longer. Sharper. What are you saying? He asked. And there it was. The question. The real one. I'm saying, I continued, that there is nothing to transfer. I watched his face carefully. Every small movement. Every flicker of thought. There's no joint ownership. No secondary claim. No simplification needed. Each word landed exactly where it needed to. That's not what I meant, he said. Of course it wasn't. Not out loud. I also know, I added, about the inquiries. That did it. That was the moment. His posture shifted. Completely. What inquiries? He asked. But the question lacked strength. Lacked conviction. I reached forward again. Turned another page. Names. Dates. Records. Clear. Undeniable. You didn't think I would find out? I asked. Not accusing. Not emotional. Just curious. His eyes moved quickly across the page. Too quickly. Like someone trying to outrun something that had already caught them. That's not what this looks like, he said. There it was. The defense. Predictable. Familiar. Then tell me, I said calmly. What does it look like? Silence. Long uncomfortable. Real. I was just trying to help, he said finally. And for the first time, there it was. Not control. Not calculation. Something else. Something weaker. Help. I repeated. Yes, he insisted. You can't manage all of this forever. I was just planning ahead. I finished. He stopped. Mid-sentence. Yes, he said. Quiet now. Careful. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Looked at him. Not as a child. Not as someone I needed to protect. But as he was. A grown man. Making choices. With her. I asked. That landed differently. He froze. Just for a second. Then, she's just trying to make things easier, he said. Of course. She was. Always easier. Always simpler. Always better. I nodded slowly. I see. And I did. Finally. Completely. You should have talked to me, he added. There it was. The shift. Blame redirected. Subtly. Carefully. I'm talking to you now, I said. And that was the truth. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It wasn't fragile. It was final. I agree with you, I said once more. His head lifted slightly. Hope again. Still there. Still holding on. Things do need to change. I let that sit for a moment. Just long enough. Then, they already have. He didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't argue. Because in that moment, he understood. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. And that was all I needed. After that, he didn't argue. Not immediately. He just sat there. Still. Quiet. Looking at the papers as if they might change if he stared long enough. They didn't. Truth rarely does. I didn't know, he said finally. His voice was lower now. Less certain. Less constructed. I believe that, I replied. And I did. Because the details? Those were never his strength. He wasn't the one who planned. He was the one who followed. But I was trying to do the right thing, he added quickly. There it was again. That need to justify. To reshape what had already happened. To you, I said calmly. Or to her. The question didn't sound harsh. But it landed that way. He looked up at me. Really looked this time. And for a brief moment, I saw it. Not the man sitting in front of me, but the boy he used to be. Confused. Caught between something he didn't fully understand, and someone he trusted more than himself. That's not fair, he said quietly. Fair. Another word. Another shield. No, I agreed. It isn't. And that surprised him. I saw it in his face. The shift. The hesitation. None of this is fair, I continued. But fairness stopped being part of this conversation a long time ago. Silence settled again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. Felt clear. What do you want me to say? He asked. And there it was. Not an apology. Not accountability. Just direction. I don't want you to say anything, I replied. I meant that too, because words at this point didn't matter. I stood up slowly, walked past him, back, into the kitchen. He didn't follow. Not right away. I picked up the gift from the table, turned it in my hands, felt the edges of the paper, the careful ribbon, the effort I had put into something that no longer had meaning. He appeared in the doorway, quiet, uncertain. Mom! He said it softly this time, different, almost careful. I didn't respond to the word. Not immediately. Instead, I placed the gift back down on the table, still unopened. Do you remember this? I asked. He frowned slightly. What? This table, I said, resting my hand against it. You used to sit right there. You couldn't even reach the floor with your feet. A pause. His eyes followed my hand, then shifted. You used to tell me everything, I continued. School, friends, the things that scared you. He didn't interrupt, didn't argue. You trusted me, I said. Another pause. Longer this time. I still do, he said. Quiet, careful. I looked at him then. Not harshly, not with anger, just honestly. No, I said. And that was the first time my voice carried weight. Not volume, not emotion, just truth. You trust her, I continued. He didn't respond, didn't deny it. And that's your choice, I added, because it was, always had been. But this, I gestured lightly toward the house around us. This is mine. Simple, clear, unarguable. I'm not asking for it, he said quickly. Not anymore. I know, I replied. And I did. 'Cause now, he understood. At least enough to stop asking out loud. Another silence. But this one felt different. Less like tension. More like distance. So what happens now, he asked. That question mattered. More than anything else he had said. I took a slow breath. Then answered. Now you go home. He blinked. Once. As if he hadn't expected that. And I stay here, I continued. In my house. Living my life. The way I have been. That's it, he asked. I nodded. That's it. No punishment. No shouting. No dramatic ending. Just separation. Clear. Final. He stood there for a moment longer. As if waiting for something else. An opening. A second chance. A softer answer. There wasn't one. Okay, he said finally. Quiet. Small. He turned. Walked toward the door. Slower than when he arrived. At the threshold he stopped. Just for a second. Like he might say something. Anything. He didn't. The door closed behind him. Softly. And just like that, the house was quiet again. But not empty. Not this time. Because for the first time in a long while, everything in it belonged exactly where it was supposed to be. Including me. The silence that followed was not the same as before. It didn't press against me. Didn't echo. Didn't remind me of what was missing. Simply existed. And for the first time in a long while, so did I. I stood there in the kitchen, listening to the quiet settle naturally around me. No tensión. No waiting. No expectación. Just stillness. I walked slowly to the door he had just closed. Not to open it. Not to call him back. Just to stand there for a moment. My hand rested lightly against the wood. Solid. Familiar. Mine. He said I wasn't his mother. I spoke the words out loud again. Not to relive them. Not to feel them. But to understand them. Because words like that, they don't erase history. They reveal something else. Something that had already changed long before they were spoken. I turned away from the door and walked back into the house. Through the hallway. Past the living room. Into the kitchen. Each step steady. Unrushed. Certain. The gift was still sitting on the table. Exactly where I had left it. Unopened. Untouched. I looked at it for a long moment. Then finally, picked it up. The paper crinkled softly under my fingers as I untied the ribbon. Slowly. Carefully. Not because it mattered. But because I chose to. Inside was a simple bracelet. Silver. Delicate. The kind I used to wear years ago, before life became more about function than beauty. I held it in my hand, turning it slightly so it caught the light. It was beautiful, thoughtful, personal, and yet, it hadn't come from him. I smiled faintly, not bitter, not sad, just aware. I walked to the drawer by the sink and opened it, placed the bracelet inside, closed it, not thrown away, not rejected, just put in its place. Everything had a place now. That was the difference. I moved back into the living room and sat down, across from the empty chair, my husband's chair. You were right, I said softly, not expecting an answer, not needing one. Life doesn't warn you before it changes. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of the day settle into something lighter, something clearer. For years, I had tried to hold everything together, to keep the family close, to make space for everyone, to be needed, to be included, to be enough. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten something important. Being a mother doesn't mean being owned, doesn't mean being diminished, doesn't mean being replaced. And love, real love, doesn't erase you. I looked around the room, at the walls, the furniture, the quiet. Nothing had changed. And yet, everything had. 'Cause now, I wasn't waiting for anyone to come back. Wasn't hoping for things to return to how they used to be. Wasn't holding on to a version of my life that no longer existed. I was simply here, present, clear, unapologetically so. The phone didn't ring. The door didn't open. No one came back. And that was okay, because peace doesn't come from being chosen, comes from choosing yourself. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again. And in that quiet, steady space, I understood something I hadn't fully seen before. He said I wasn't his mother, and maybe that was the moment I stopped trying to be one. Thank you for listening to this story. That if it meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Your support helps me keep telling stories like this. Top of form, bottom of form, top of form, bottom of form, top of form, bottom of form.